What up, YouTube? This is Steven, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to do a book review on El País de Cuarto Pisos y otros ensayos de José Luis Gonzalez. And I was actually found out about this book through school. It was one of my assigned readings for the semester, and the class was like a special topics class, and it pretty much just dealt with Puerto Rican essay writers. And years after the class, I wound up, reading the book again, and then I read it a few more times. I think I read the book in total maybe like 3 or 4 times. And for me, I really enjoyed reading this book. It's a bit wordy, and the vocabulary is challenging, particularly if you speak Spanish as a foreign language. Then the vocabulary could possibly be challenging to you. On the plus side, I did learn a lot of new words. However, on the downside, I kind of spent a lot of time trying to figure out what words, figure out what the meaning or the translation / meaning of the words were, of some words. And there were a few words that I just couldn't find the meaning to. But pretty much the book deals with more or less a few topics, but one of the major topics of this book is identity. And in kind of like in the first essay, which is the title, El País de Cuarto Pisos, Jose's students poses a question to him, and the question more or less is, how do you believe that the Puerto Rican culture has affected or has been affected by the North American colonial intervention, and how do you see its present development? And Jose uses this essay, El País de Cuarto Pisos, to answer that question. And in that essay, he uses like a metaphor, and the metaphor is like a 4-story building, El País de Cuarto Pisos, and he's referring to like the country of Puerto Rico being similar to like a 4-story building. And he says that the first story of the building is like the African influence, because he feels like that's the base of Puerto Rico. And some people would argue that it's not, but he argues that it is, and he feels like ultimately, Afro-Puerto Ricans are the most Puerto Rican people because they didn't have any choice but to be Puerto Rican, while others, like particularly the European invaders, they were often very quick to leave or want to leave, or dismiss their identity and hold on to like, oh, I'm a Spaniard, things like that. Then like the second floor would be, or is like the immigrant wave that happened, and which I didn't even know about the immigrant wave. But yeah, there were like 2 immigrant waves, and it brought like a whole slew of European immigrants to the island. Your English, your Irish, your Spaniards, I think Catalonians, French people, um, Dutch folk as well. You know, a whole slew. And let's see. I believe I kind of get confused about this, but I believe that um, the third floor is like the North American invasion, you know, that took place in 1898. That is the third floor. Um, you know, and the North American invasion is very important because that is when Puerto Rico became a colony of the United States versus a colony of Spain. You know, and you know, to this day, you know, Puerto Rico still is an independent country, and there's some people, you know, as far as politics are concerned, it's like some people who want Puerto Rico to become independent. There's some people who want Puerto Rico to become a state, and there's some people who want Puerto Rico to stay as a commonwealth. Um, you know, so I enjoyed reading the chapter, El País de Cuarto Pisos, the chapter. Then the next chapter deals with like literature and national identity in Puerto Rico, and Jose goes through like, you know, the literature, you know, Puerto Rican literature, and as well poses the question, all right, is it Puerto Rican literature if it's written in English, you know, or is it Puerto Rican literature if the people who write it live in, say, New York, and they're New Yorkers instead of Puerto Ricans? You know, interesting questions, right? And then there's the next chapter, pretty much deals with like, quote unquote, like communism, not communism, but more like um, he refers to it as libreismo, but I think that ultimately it means like common or popularism in art in Puerto Rico of today. And in that chapter, I think Jose, he more or less deals with kind of like people's view on Puerto Rican art, and I guess, you know, the culture of the oppressed versus the culture of the oppressor, and how kind of like both cultures borrow from each other. And I thought that was pretty interesting because that does sort of happen. You know, it not does sort of happen, but it does happen. You know, the next chapter is like El Escritor en el Exilio. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Exilio. There you go. And that's basically just a chapter about himself and his experience. Kind of like more or less like a him giving us kind of like a brief life story, you know, up until this point. You know, he was born in the Dominican Republic, but wound up moving to Puerto Rico early as an infant. And that was like right before like the I forget that guy's name, Trujillo regime, you know, took hold of the Dominican Republic. So they kind of fled the Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico. So yeah, and I enjoyed that chapter to, you know, learn more about the author. I like that. And the next chapter is Bernardo Vega. Well, Bernardo Vega, El Luchador y su Pueblo. So pretty much Bernardo Vega, the fighter, and his people. And you know, the chapter pretty much deals with him. And I believe that Jose wind up like writing kind of like an introduction to one of his books, I believe. I think so. Something like that. It may not be exactly like that. Then the next chapter is like razón y sentido del lamento boricano. So pretty much reason and meaning of the Puerto Rican like cry, I believe that's how it's translated as. You know, lamento. So like cry or regret, perhaps. But yeah. And I think that chapter, let's see, what does that chapter kind of deal with? More or less politics. It's a short chapter. You know. And the last chapter is sobre la literatura puertorriqueña de los 50, which is pretty much, let's see, about the Puerto Rican literature of the 50s. And that chapter is the last chapter, and it kind of like just deals with classification of people in terms of the year like their works were popular, or either the year that they kind of like their generation. You know, they're trying to group people into like kind of like particular eras and generations. And Jose's like, I'm not really feeling it. You know. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The book is more or less about 150 pages. I enjoyed reading it. However, I did feel it was a challenge for me. Like I said, I speak Spanish as a foreign language, so it was a challenge for me to read this particular book just because there were so many new words for me to learn. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but like for me, it was just a lot of words, you know. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's just like, if you do read it and you do speak Spanish as a, you know, a foreign language, you should possibly prepare yourself for what could come, you know. However, it is a book that I plan to reread a few more times. I think there's more things to get from the book as well. I spent so much time, like, you know, underlining words and writing their meanings. I just want to continue to, you know, benefit from all that work that I put into that, because I did do a lot of underlining and writing the translation of words, you know. Because, you know, like at one point, you know, depending on what page, like there's so, like, if you don't know, it's kind of like hard to keep up, you know, if you don't know what's going on. Sometimes you can do that, but in this particular situation, I'm like, if I didn't look these words up, then I would be totally lost, you know. And, you know, this was assigned in college, and I'm thinking like, was this a bit too much for us? I guess we got by, but like, you know, was this a bit too much for us to be reading, you know? But then again, it's college, you know. But I don't know. I just, it's an interesting question, you know. But like I said, overall, I enjoyed reading the book. I learned a lot of things about Puerto Rico, because pretty much I practically knew nothing about Puerto Rico before taking the class and before reading the book. You know, even though Puerto Rico is a part of the United States, we're not really taught about it. And, you know, I learned, you know, about the African influence, you know, and the immigrant waves that I didn't know about. And, you know, Puerto Rico ended slavery in 1873, like 10 years later after the United States did. I didn't know that. as well. 1898 being a very important year for Puerto Rico as well as Cuba too. That's when the United States won the Spanish American War. I think that's the name of it. And they won Puerto Rico along with other entities as the spoils of their victory. So a very important year, 1898, and you will often see that year thrown in here and there, you know. And as well, this book does list a lot of different, it cites a lot of different works. So if you're interested in reading more about something, you can kind of like, oh, hey, let's look at, look into this author that Jose is talking about, you know. But I think I said all I have to say for the time being. So thanks a lot for watching. Feel free to comment, feel free to subscribe, feel free to give me a thumbs up. Your feedback and support are extremely appreciated and extremely valued. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.